bells of Rome did not so much ring as bleed, iron throats crying over a city that had forgotten how to sleep. Incense rolled like battlefield smoke through the basilica, sweet as forgiveness, heavy as guilt, in the apostolic palace, where daylight seldom touched the stone without losing heart. A door that was never opened anyway. 3 men entered. A cardinal whose scarlet pooled at his feet like a wound, a scholar priest with ink-stained fingers and the eyes of an owl, and a knight in a white mantle marked by a red cross that had drunk real blood. The knight left muddy prints on marble. He did not apologize. Rome could wash floors. It could not wash the moon. They called the scholar priest Magister Severin, archivist of whispers and custodian of pages that should have stayed unturned. He cradled a small reliquary. Not a bone, not a nail. Something older, wrapped in dark cloth, as if night itself had a swaddling. When he bowed, the reliquary throbbed against the candlelight, and a dozen saints on painted frescoes seemed to look away. "The Ordo Lupi petitions audience," Severin said, voice precise. "Careful, as if one wrong syllable might call something to the window. There is an old famine on the road through the Schwarzwald. It feeds on pilgrims, on torchbearers, on the brave. It has learned the taste of prayer." Cardinal Vitelli sneered like a man chewing lemon pith. "Bandits, wolves, pagans. We own annals stuffed with such insects." "Not insects," Severin said, and he unwrapped the relic, a claw. Not fossil nor fairy tale, not the dull, knobby shame of some malformed wolf. The thing had a geometry too cruel for nature, curved like a sickle, ridged like a psalm scored by teeth. Silver scored it back. A dull glitter where monks had hammered filings into the keratin, as if to teach it penance. Around it the candles faltered. A draught that no door admitted shivered along the floor and licked the hem of the knight's mantle. The knight did not flinch. He was tall, with the sad mouth of a man who'd kept too many vigils in other people's sorrows. Sir Alaric of Montereau. He had the weather of the Rhine in his bones, and the weight of silence in his posture. "The villagers call it Lupus Dei," Severin continued. "The Wolf of God, a title born of fear, not doctrine. But the Ordo Lupi traces its line past Rome, past Athens, past the forest altars where blood did not know names. It does not kill to eat, it kills to remember." Cardinal Vitelli's ring scraped the table. Blasphemy dressed as folklore, folklore dressed as evidence. Severin answered, letting the relic's shadow fall long. A scribe in Mainz drew the wounds left on a Templar's breastplate, 4 crescents, inward facing, not the rake of a beast, the mark of a hand that had forgotten its fingers. A Benedictine smith in Speyer soaked silver chain in chrism and found it black by dawn. A child in Villingen wrote a letter to St. Hubert and did not finish the prayer because she had no throat left to finish it with. Silence took the room, like water takes a sinking ship. A second door opened. No herald ran, no fanfare blew. N sank to knees, for the Vicar of Christ moved like gravity itself had put on white. His face was ancient and kind, like a summer that still remembers famine. He touched the reliquary, and the candles steadied, stubborn against a wind gone cold. "Speak plainly," the Pope said. Severin glanced at Alaric, then unfolded a second thing. A map, not of roads, but of howls. Little circles stitched like wounds. Across the Black Forest, each ring a night and a moon and a mouth that had to make itself larger just to tell the story. At the center, a sigil, 2 crescents facing, a cross between them, a black cross. Alaric's voice was rough-hewn oak. "Your Holiness, I led 8 brothers along the pilgrim road as bait and penance both. We found the shrine at midnight, a pagan stone strangled with rosaries by frightened hands. We prayed. It came." "How?" Vitelli asked, unable to help himself. "Does a prayer smell like meat?" Alaric said. And something of the night rode the word. It hunted the sound of faith, the way hawks hunt the shadow of flight. Our steel kissed it and found itself a lie. But when Brother Mathieu split his ring and bled the silver into his blade, the thing remembered pain. It hates silver, and it hates singing, not hymns, singing. They listened, and the city listened through them. And somewhere a street seller shouted peaches in a voice that had never yet heard midnight's teeth. "We have written of such things," Severin said, "but writing is a way of keeping faith at arm's length. The Ordo Lupi is done writing. We ask to reach into the forest and close our hand. Extermination." The Pope asked. Severin's tongue weighed words like coin, binding. Vitelli's scoff thudded off the ceiling. "We are not sorcerers. No," Severin murmured. "We are custodians. Some doors we brick, some we bar, some we learn to lock and unlock because the world, alas, is not always saved by burning it." Alaric stepped forward, setting his gauntlets on the table. "Give me men who can stand under a singing moon without forgetting the creed. Give me chain bathed in chrism and blades cut with filings. Give me a psalm the wolf cannot bear." The Pope's eyes were winter fields, bare, honest, searching for seedlings, and if the binding fails, then we become the psalm, Alaric said simply. "And we are sung into pieces." The Pope laid his palm on the map over the Black Cross. The room tasted like iron again. "The Templars will ride, not as heralds, but as shadows. This is not an army's war. This is a ledger's war. Entries made in blood and balanced, God willing, by restraint." Vitelli began to protest. The Pope stilled him with a look that had quieted kings. "You will carry the Church's silence, Sir Alaric. No banners, no relic processions. If you fail, the story drowns in the Tiber. If you succeed, it drowns anyway." Severin rapped the claw, and the candles breathed easier. He handed Alaric a small ampule of dark dust, powdered sanctified silver mixed with salt, gathered from the tears of a penitent. "Old custom, new need. Draw a circle, make it sing." Alaric bowed, a hinge creaking. On an old door, when he rose, there was a wolf at the edge of his reflection in the reliquary's sheen, or perhaps only the shape of Rome's knight. Outside, the bells found a rhythm that made the pigeons lift like torn paper. The city went about its churn of bread and prayer and sin. In a courtyard where armor had learned the names of rain, a dozen horses stamped and snorted as if they could hear a far forest shaking itself awake. The Templars mounted, white mantles taking moonfall like snow accepts blood. Sir Alaric raised 2 fingers, traced the cross in the dusty air, and whispered to men who would follow him into a throat with no tongue. "We ride quiet," he said. "We ride like we know the woods invented teeth before we invented faith." They went through the gate without trumpets, and Rome shut its eyes so it could pretend it had dreamed them. The moon climbed the night like a thief. Climbs a garden wall, somewhere, beyond roads and reason. Something that remembered being a man lifted its head, and the wolves that were not curses cowered in the ferns. Faith had put on spurs. The forest smiled without lips. They gathered not in cathedral but in crypt, stone damp, air salted with mold, frescoes of saints flaking to reveal older gods painted beneath. Torchlight throbbed against helmets hung like skulls on the wall. At the center lay an altar not for mass but for promise, its marble scarred with grooves where swords had kissed too hard. Sir Alaric of Montereau stood with 12 brothers, each one cloaked in white that drank the dark. Their mantles bore the red cross, not embroidered, but seared into cloth, dyed with blood given at their last confession. They had ridden from every compass of Christendom, from the lime quarries of England, from the dunes of Outremer, from the Rhine where fog could drown an army's courage. Now they were one line, one silence, one throat. Magister Severin stood at the altar, reliquary of the wolf's claw before him. He did not lift it yet. Instead he opened a vellum scroll, written not in Latin but in a hybrid tongue, half psalm, half curse, every line ending with a scar. "This is not canon," Cardinal Vitelli hissed from the shadows, where he had come to watch though he would not bless. "This is blasphemy." Severin's owl eyes glowed with sleepless certainty. Blasphemy is sometimes the tongue heaven lends. When Latin is too brittle, Alaric drew his sword, silver dusted along. The fuller, sanctified by chrism that still clung sticky to the hilt. He laid it flat on the altar, and his brothers followed, steel upon steel until the marble groaned under weight. The reliquary claw, black and cruel, seemed to flex at the scent of them. The Pope had not sanctioned this ritual, but the Pope had not forbidden it either. Rome had perfected the art of silence. Severin's voice rolled by the wounds of Christ, by the song of the psalmist, by the dust of martyrs yet unquiet. You shall not slay but bind, you shall not burn but chain, you shall not banish but keep. The knights repeated, their words iron filings drawn to a magnet of dread. Stretch your hands, Severin ordered. They bared palms already cut from sword drill. Severin took a stylus sharpened to cruelty, dipped it in blood mingled with powdered silver, and scored each palm with a cross. The wound hissed, searing like brand and frost together. One knight bit his lip until his teeth cracked enamel. Another whispered the pater noster backwards. Because pain has its own grammar, the reliquary claw lifted. Severin pressed its tip to each knight's wound, smearing their blood with its ancient keratin. The claw drank it, or seemed to, and the knights felt veins stir, as if something other than blood had been invited inside. Alaric did not flinch, his voice steadied like oak against gale. We are the silence Rome will not write, we are the psalm sung with teeth, answered his brothers. Severin closed the scroll. The torches spat smoke that smelt of wet fur. Alaric raised his blade, and they raised theirs, points glittering with silver that pretended to be moonlight. By this oath we ride, not as hunters, not as martyrs, but as wardens. The wolf will learn. The cross is not just wood, but fang. The crypt thundered with steel against shield. It echoed like a heartbeat Rome dared not claim. Above, bells tolled matins. The city prayed for mercy. The knights prayed for chains, strong enough to hold nightmares. They filed out into the cloister where moonlight poured like milk over stone. Their horses waited, restless, ears twitching at sounds no man yet heard. Sir Alaric swung into the saddle, mantle flaring pale as shroud. He turned to his brothers, eyes shadowed with duty deeper than faith. Remember what we swore, not to kill but to bind. And if the binding breaks? They answered in one voice that was not quite human anymore. Then we become the lock. The gates of Rome opened with a groan like a prayer regretted. Hooves struck cobblestone, and the city receded behind them. The moon rode high, and every mile, north was a mile closer to the black forest's breath. Somewhere between oath and silence, the wolf already stirred. It had smelt their vow, and vows have meat. The road into the Schwarzwald was less a road than a wound. Mud sucking at hooves, branches arching low as if conspiring to break necks. The air stank of rot and resin, wet pine and something older, like marrow left too long in the sun. Even the birds had abdicated. Only crows dared, and even they seemed to mutter apologies before they took wing. The Templars rode in silence, save for the clink of mail and the hiss of leather under strain. Each man bore not only sword and shield, but charms pressed upon them by desperate peasants. A child's braid, a saint's medal, salt sewn into him. Sir Alaric allowed it. Faith was not always forged in Rome. Sometimes it was woven in kitchens, in tears, in superstition that clung like barnacles to belief. By the second night, they came upon the first corpse, not a man entire, just the torso, ribs pried open like a reliquary cracked by greedy hands. The organs were gone but not eaten. Laid beside in careful arrangement were rosary beads, each stained with something that was not wax. Brother Udo crossed himself until his fingers cramped. "This is not hunger," Alaric said. His voice had the weight of iron cooled in river water. "This is memory." They camped in a hollow where the trees leaned too close, their bark scarred with claw marks rising higher than any man's reach. Severin spread his maps on a fallen trunk, circles upon circles marking howls reported by pilgrims. Each red ink blot pulsed like an artery. "It is hunting patterns," Severin muttered, owl-eyed, not random. "It encircles shrines, as if jealous of prayer." Night was a slow, suffocating sermon. The forest breathed damp through every seam of armor. Owls ceased their mourning, and silence thickened until even the horses sweated with unease. Then it came, not a howl but a hymn stretched into scream, the voice of something that remembered being human but had forgotten the comfort of words. The Templars snapped to arms, shields raised, silvered blades drawn, the undergrowth ruptured, a shape lunged through torchlight, half man, half wolf, neither, form complete, both suffering. Its limbs bulged with strength that broke its own bones and remade them. Its jaw split wider than truth allowed, teeth layered like a cathedral's spires, stacked atop one another. Fur bristled in patches, mottled with scars that gleamed as if stitched by fire. Brother Mathieu struck first, blade dusted with sanctified silver. The beast recoiled, shrieked not of pain but insult, as if reminded it could bleed. Another knight thrust a spear which shattered, as if it had struck quarrystone. Alaric charged, shield raised, voice thundering psalm. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow," the beast's claw scythed his shield in half. Splinters flying like hail, Alaric reeled but did not yield. They fought not as men, but as a choir of steel, blades striking in rhythm with breaths of prayer. Yet for every wound silver carved, the beast answered with frenzy. Brother Udo's throat opened beneath claws. Another knight vanished into darkness. Scream cut short, Severin flung salt and ash in circles, chanting verses that blistered the air. The beast shrank back, just a step, snarling as if the words were nettles into the circle. Alaric barked. The knights drove the thing toward the glowing dust. Every blow of silver herded, every chant pressed it tighter. Finally, it stood snarling at the circle's edge, muscles quivering, eyes red as martyr candles. The forest held. Its breath, for a heartbeat, it looked almost like a man, eyes full of grief, mouth opening as if to speak. Then the moon tore through cloud, and humanity drowned. It flung itself against the silver line, shrieking, flesh searing as if branded by the cross itself. The knights pressed shields, blades ready. Alaric's voice cut through the din. "We cannot kill it." Severin's hands shook over his scroll, "Then bind it." The circle flared, the wolf writhed, and the Black Forest knew again what it meant to be a battlefield where no army marched. The hunt was over, the keeping had begun. The abbey crouched in ruin, a skeleton of faith gnawed hollow by moss. Its bell tower leaned like a penitent ashamed of prayer, and the stones of its cloister sweated with mildew. Here, beneath this abandoned house of God, the Templars dragged their prize. Iron chains glowing with chrism, silver shackles singing whenever the beast strained, torches guttered against the thing's breath. The wolf thrashed, ribs warping, claws rasping stone until sparks bled like fireflies. Its eyes, molten and mad, darted to every crucifix nailed crooked on the walls. Each icon cracked as if the wood itself feared the gaze. Magister Severin traced a circle across the flagstones with powdered silver and salt. His scrolls fluttered, though no wind stirred, as if eager to be read against their own will. The knights tightened the chains. Brother Mathieu bled from a dozen gashes, yet held the fetter fast, lips muttering credo between coughs of blood. A Vatican envoy, lean and robed in scarlet, stepped from the shadows. His voice was a blade honed on obedience. "Exercise it, break its bones, burn the husk. The church does not bargain with wolves." Sir Alaric, face lantern-lit, shook his head. "We have seen its strength. To kill it is to waste it harnessed. It can guard pilgrims, scatter heresy, win wars no man dares to fight." The envoy spat the word like poison. Sorcery. Alaric's gaze was a cathedral emptied of doubt, pragmatism. Severin's hand trembled over the scroll. "There is precedent in older texts. Rights to shackle, not destroy. The beast's blood can be made to swear where its mouth will not. The envoy drew a dagger, silvered and holy, meaning to drive it into the monster's heart. But Alaric caught his wrist. For a breath, knight and priest glared, steel against steel, faith against hunger. Then Alaric tore the dagger free and flung it aside. Rome commands silence, he growled. But silence breeds rot. We will not hide this. Wolf in earth, we will bind it in oath, the beast snarled as if it understood. As if insulted by the notion of servitude, chains rang, salt smoked, and moonlight lanced through a crack in the roof, painting the wolf in white fire. Severin raised the claw relic like a monstrance. Kneel, one by one. The Templars knelt within, the circle's glow, palms reopened by fresh cuts. Their blood dripped, hissing where it struck silver dust. Alaric thrust his hand forward. Wolf of God, bleed with us. Let your curse be fettered to our creed. The creature writhed, half a man's sob raking through its throat. For an instant, it seemed the ritual would fail. But then the beast struck its own chest with a claw, tearing flesh, spilling blood, blacker than ink. The chains drank it. The circle blazed. Screams filled the crypt. Knights and monster alike, voices tangled until no man could tell his own from the wolf's. Their eyes burned, their veins sang like harp strings strung too tight. Some collapsed, frothing. Others grinned through agony, as if tasting new power at the edge of damnation. When it ended, the wolf slumped, shackled, chest heaving, its blood steamed where it mingled with theirs. Severin's voice, hoarse, declared, "A pact is written. The beast is no longer wild. It belongs to the cross." Alaric stood, pallid, shaking. His palm bore not only the cross-cut of blood, but a faint pattern of fur, ghostly and dark. He raised his sword, voice raw. "By this pact, we become not merely men of God. We become his wardens. Let the forest fear our howl as it fears the moon." The other knights rose, eyes reflecting torchlight too bright, too sharp. Something of the wolf had moved into them. The envoy backed away, horror dripping from his face. "You have damned yourselves." Alaric's shadow fell across him. "No, we have armed ourselves." Above them the broken bell swung though no rope pulled, tolling once, twice, as if the heavens themselves bore witness to a bargain struck in blood and chains. The Black Cross Pact was born. The Black Forest is never still, even when the wind dies, even when no bird sings. The trees whisper to each other in the groan of their roots. That night, the abbey walls bled shadow. Torches smoked as if drowning. The pact was scarcely sealed when the air itself shifted. Heavy with the weight of men approaching, they came robed in black, not white. Their mantles bore no cross but a chalice, ink dark, stitched as though from dried veins. The order of the Black Chalice. Zealots, heretics, fanatics who believed the wolf was no curse but judgment, a lash in God's hand. Where the Templars sought to bind, they sought to unleash, brothers of false cloth. Their captain called. Stepping into torchlight, his voice was velvet poured over blades. "You mistake chains for piety. The wolf of God does not kneel. It tests by binding it. You defy heaven's trial by caging it. You stand between mankind and its punishment." Sir Alaric raised his blood-marked palm, silver gleaming along his sword, his voice cut like frost. "We cage what slaughters the innocent. We leash it so faith may walk unmolested. Step aside or join it in chains." The Black Chalice Knights laughed, cruel and hollow. They drew their weapons, axes, dipped in pitch, maces crowned with bone, swords etched with runes that no priest would bless. And then the clash began. Steel shrieked against steel, the abbey floor shuddering beneath armored boots, Templar shields locked in wall, but the zealots fought like wolves themselves, each strike wild and ecstatic. Silvered swords bit, but the Black Chalice had trained for madness. Pain only made them howl. Brother Mathieu fell, skull caved beneath a spiked hammer. Severin screamed psalms over his scroll, the words bursting from him in Latin and something older, louder than the clash of steel. The circle around the beast flared, blinding. The werewolf thrashed in its chains, shrieking in mockery of both sides, blood-spattered stone, searing where it touched silver. Every roar rattled the ribs of the abbey until dust rained from the vaults. A zealot cleaved into Brother Udo's side, and as his blood soaked the circle, the wolf lunged against it, its claw swiping across his open wound. The scream was not only pain, but transformation. Udo's body convulsed, bones warping, mouth lengthening into muzzle. His eyes went white, then red. "Saints preserve us," Severin whispered. "It spreads through blood. More chaos, more cuts, more bites. The battlefield became a furnace of prayer and curse, of human throats learning new sounds. Some Templars, wounded in the fight, twitched under the same fever, their cries breaking into snarls. One brother tore off his own helm with claws that had not been there a heartbeat ago. The black Chalice Knights laughed even as they bled. "Yes," their captain cried, "the judgment begins." Alaric cut him down with a silvered stroke that split helm and skull. Yet as the zealot fell, the wolf within the circle surged again, testing its new kin. The abbey floor burned with salt and blood. Knights fell, others rose as things no longer. Holy men! The pact that was meant to bind now spread like contagion through their very veins. Sir Alaric, panting, helm cracked, lifted his blade and shouted through the din, "Hold the line! We swore to bind it, then let us bind ourselves, if and we must." The wolf roared in triumph. The circle flickered, and the black chalice charged again. The night became a hymn sung by broken throats, a choir of steel, claw, and damnation. Rome received them in silence, not the proud silence of triumph, but the stifled hush of scandal. Cloaks once white were now ragged, stained by blood that was not entirely their own. Their numbers were halved, their eyes burned too brightly, reflecting candlelight in a way that unsettled even the most devout. They entered the apostolic palace like revenants, dragging chains of duty across marble. The Pope sat enthroned, still and pale as bone, with cardinals arrayed like vultures in scarlet. The Vatican envoy who had witnessed the pact stood at the dais, face carved into righteous fury. "They have mingled their oaths with the beast," he spat. "They are no longer knights of Christ, but mongrels of the moon." Sir Alaric strode forward, helm under his arm, gaze locked on the pontiff. His palm, still scarred with the blood cross, pulsed faintly as if the mark itself had breath. He did not. "Kneel. We did what was required. The wolf is bound. The pilgrim road is safe. We carry the curse now so others may walk free." "Curse?" Vitelli hissed. "You dare call this holy scourge a curse?" His ringed hand trembled with indignation. "You chose corruption. You bartered with judgment. You have damned your order." Severin, gaunt from sleepless vigils, unrolled a scroll inked with the record of their ritual. The parchment shimmered faintly, words shifting as if unwilling to remain still. "Knowledge is no sin. Ignorance is. We have written the terms of the pact in blood and salt. It can be contained, it can be wielded." The Pope's voice broke through, slow and grave. "At what cost?" No one answered, because in the silence the cost revealed itself. One of the surviving knights convulsed where he stood, eyes flashing amber, teeth lengthening before the horrified gaze of cardinals. Alaric gripped him by the shoulders, whispering, "The creed," until the seizure passed and the man collapsed, weeping like a child. The chamber reeked of fur and fear. That was enough. The Pope rose, his shadow long and merciless. "The Templars will be dissolved, their records burned, their relics sealed beneath stone. This pact, this black sacrament will never be spoken of again." Alaric's jaw clenched, but he bowed his head. He knew there was no appeal. Severin tried to protest, voice raw. "If you bury this, the knowledge dies. And when the curse rises again, as it will, who will know how to chain it?" "Chains are not salvation," the Pope thundered. "Christ is." Vitelli seized the moment, motioning guards forward. Arrest them, exile them to monasteries where their howls will be smothered by stone. But when the guards advanced, they hesitated. The knight's eyes glowed faintly, and a growl uncoiled in their throats. Not human, not beast, but something in between. Fear is a contagion quicker than plague. The guards faltered, and that was enough for Alaric to speak. We are not your prisoners. We are your shadow. Rome can bury our names, but it cannot bury what we carry. We are wardens of the wolf, and the wolf is in us now. With that, the knights turned and walked from the hall. No sword raised against them, no hand dared touch them. They vanished into the night streets of Rome, mantles flaring like torn banners. By dawn, they were gone, scattered to monasteries, forests and deserts, carrying with them the blood and the burden. The Vatican sealed the records, branding them apocryphal, heretical. The Ordo Lupi was unspoken. But beneath the Sistine vaults, in chambers colder than crypts, a single reliquary was kept. The claw of the beast, bound in silver, pulsing faintly as though it remembered the pact. And in the forests north of Rome, peasants whispered of pale riders who prayed under blood moons with voices that cracked into howls. Rome had betrayed them, but the curse would not be betrayed. It lived now in men who had taken an oath too deep to drown. Centuries peeled away like flaking paint, but the wound never healed. The Vatican tried to write over the scars. Papal bulls, inquisitions, councils convened to smother whispers under parchment. Yet ink cannot bury blood. Beneath Rome, in vaults colder than sin, the sealed reliquary pulsed with memory. The claw of Lupus Dei, silver-bound, still restless, the Black Cross Pact, did not die with its knights. It changed shape, as curses always do. Some fled to monasteries in the Alps, where moonlight turned cloisters into cages. Brothers sang psalms with voices that cracked into growls. Their walls bore claw marks in places no brush dared paint. Pilgrims told of hooded monks who prayed with one hand and hunted with the other, their footprints ending where wolf tracks began. Others became mercenaries, soldiers without master, selling their fangs in secret wars. Chronicles speak of nameless riders in white mantles who broke Moorish lines in Spain, who sacked outposts in the Baltic where pagans called the Moon Mother. Always they vanished before dawn, leaving only torn banners and paw prints in blood-soaked earth. Rome called them ghosts, villages called them guardians, but in taverns and keeps, another name endured. Lunar crusaders, men who had bound themselves not just to Christ but to the beast, wielding curse as weapon, the order of the Black Chalice. Scattered but never slain, became shadows themselves. In secret rites, they worshipped the wolf as God's lash, whispering that every blood moon drew the world closer to judgment. Their descendants clashed with the cursed Templars across centuries. Wars fought not on battlefields of kings, but in forests, crypts, and graveyards where howls drowned hymns. By the 15th century, the Vatican had hidden all records of the Black Cross Pact under the Index of Forbidden Archives. The scroll Severin wrote was locked in a chest, banded with silver marked only with a warning, Ne aperias nisi sanguine, open not except with blood, and still the stories bled. In the Rhineland, peasants swore a white-mantled knight saved their children from wolves, though the savior's eyes glowed red as coals. In Brittany, fishermen claimed a figure prayed on the cliffs beneath a blood moon, his shadow cast on the sea, not as man but beast. In the Carpathians, whole villages vanished, leaving only clawed doors and crucifixes snapped in half. Sir Alaric's fate was never written, but songs lingered. Ballads told of a knight who wandered, until his bones forgot the weight of armor, a man whose howl could split mountains. Some say he still rides, bound by oath beyond death, the wolf and the cross stitched into one eternal wound. In Rome, archivists changed, popes came and went, yet the claw in the reliquary still twitched when the moon waxed full. Only the deepest scholars of the Curia dared descend to hear it scrape. against silver, a sound like scripture trying to rewrite itself even now. Whenever bells falter, whenever pilgrims vanish on lonely roads, whenever the moon swells too red. Some whisper that the pact was never broken, that the Black Cross still marks a hidden bloodline, wardens who howl psalms into the dark, and deep in the Vatican's vault, beneath layers of stone and silence, something chained remembers it does not sleep. It waits for the day when Rome's locks rust, when the world forgets the warning etched in faded ink. Beware the wolf that preys. The howl echoes still, stitched through centuries, a hymn no silence can smother. And for those who hunger for more, step deeper into the shadows with our ultimate werewolf horror playlist, linked in the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.